Hey everyone, so in this video I'll give you a quick rundown of AWS EC2, which stands for Elastic Cloud Compute. It's a foundational service from AWS that lets you launch essentially what's like a virtual machine, just Amazon calls it instances, in the cloud. And so the reason it's important is because before cloud came around, companies used to have to build or lease these data centers facilities, deploy their servers in there, and it was expensive, right? So it was a large upfront investment that they would have to make into the data center. And then, if they needed to scale and have, global presence, then it would be even more expensive because now they would have to build data centers in other countries. So with a cloud, this is a lot easier because now they can just use the AWS and they can bring up resources in almost any region around the world. So in this video, we're going to bring up an EC2 instance in Ohio. So this is the EC2 Dashboard. Just click Launch Instance. And the first window that comes up is selecting the Amazon machine image. So this is like an OS template of what you want to bring up, right? And there's some canned images that already come by default from Amazon, like Amazon Linux or Red Hat or Ubuntu in Windows. You can also make your own. So if you have, for example, a standard configuration that you want all your servers to have, you can bring up a server like that, configure it, and then you can go ahead and save it as an AMI, and then you can bring up as many servers as you like. So for this demo, I'm just going to pick Windows Server 2019. Might as well be any of these other ones as well. So the next selection, step 2, is choosing the instance type. So EC2 has different instance types depending on what you want that instance for. And so, for example, this is like the T instances, which are the turbo instances that are kind of general purpose, but they allow bursting of CPU depending on the load. There are also instances for a specific type of workload, right? So, for example, there's compute optimized instances, right? So these instances have better ratio of CPUs to memory. There are GPU instances if in case you wanted to have, like a machine learning or, AI kind of related workload where you needed the GPUs. You can bring up a G3 instance. A P3 instance. If you have like a memory optimized, if you have like an in-memory database, you can bring up a memory optimized instance. But so all this really means is that, you have different options for which kind of hardware you want to bring up for your workload. So you can get hardware that better matches what you want those systems to do. And for each one of these, you essentially have instance family. You have a type, which is, the instance family, and then the size. And the size of instance determines how much resources it has, right? So here, for example, we see how many vCPUs and how many gigabytes of memory each instance has, as well as what kind of storage option it has and what the network performance for it looks like. So each vCPU technically is about half a core. So you can think about it this way. So for this demo, I'm just going to bring up a T2 Micro, which also falls into the free tier. And so one of the cool things about AWS is that you can have you can use some of their service for free up until you hit a certain threshold, right? So for example, like Lambda, there's so many executions that you have before you actually have to pay. So this gives you a nice convenient way to kind of try things out without having to pay for them. So next I'm going to select next. And here's where I configure most of my details for the EC2 instance I'm going to bring up. Now I'm going to leave most of these as defaults, but just to kind of run down through some of these for you guys. So the number of instances here lets you know how many instances you want to bring up. You can bring up more than one at a time. This specifies what virtual private cloud and subnet you want to bring this instance into. Placement group and capacity reservation allows you to bring up instances within particular placement groups. So sometimes you may want to have instances that are spread further apart from each other, and under the hood, in the AWS data center, they're running on different racks, for redundancy. Sometimes, depending on the workload, you want them all to run on the same rack so that the performance is better. So this is what placement groups can do for you. If you have Active Directory domain, you can set up those things up here, as well as you have some other options here for your EC2 instance. Next, we'll add a storage. So AWS has another storage called EBS, Elastic Block Storage. It lets you add storage to the system. For this demo, I'm just going to leave it blank, so I'll get a 30 gigabyte volume on my Windows box. I'm going to skip the tags section, but essentially it just gives you some metadata tags that you can assign to your resources. Alright, so next is the security groups. So security groups are stateful firewalls that will get applied to your instance that will filter traffic coming in. And so in this case, the default security group that will be applied, it will be created and applied to this instance. And the only thing it will allow is RDP access, so I can connect to the instance using remote desktop protocol, which runs on port 3389 from any IP in the world. And if I wanted to, I can change this to an existing security group that I have, or I can add additional rules here. If you are going to bring up an instance for anything more than just playing around with, I suggest you limit the source IP just to your own home IP or an IP range. Finally, next is the kind of review screen where you can review all the settings. And finally, we can click launch. And so you got this key prompt. So you need to, this basically lets you specify how you're going to authenticate to that instance. So for here, I'm going to create a new key pair. I'm going to call it engineering success. And then I'm going to download the key pair. So keep in mind, you can only download the key pair when you're first creating it. So after this, I'm not going to be able to pull it down anymore. And here's one from the previous run. All right, so now I'm going to go ahead and click launch instance. And this instance will start to get provisioned, right? So I see this confirmation screen, and then it gives me the instance ID that is going to be assigned to this instance. And so now I see this instance being launched inside of my EC2 console. We can see here that the public DNS has been already allocated to that instance and the public IP. And so I will be able to use my remote desktop client to connect to the instance on this address. And then you can see a lot of other information about the instance here as well, right? So you can see what key pair it's using, you can see what VPC and subnet it's in, and then you can also see the private and the internal address that it'll be using, as well as the general instance information like state and instance type. Now, one cool thing about AWS is that all this information is available programmatically, right? So just like I clicked in this console to launch this instance, I could also automatically bring these instances up by writing a script or sending some commands to AWS using the command line interface. So everything in AWS is actually an API call under the hood, and so it makes it very convenient to easily automate things. So let me go ahead and set up my remote desktop session. So I'm running on Linux, so my remote desktop client is Romina. If you're running on Windows, of course you can just use the default remote desktop client. So I'm gonna go ahead and plug in the server name over here. I'm gonna call it EC2. Username is gonna be administrator. I gotta pick this color depth. Alright, so now to get the password for this instance. For Linux hosts, when you bring them up, you can just authenticate using that key that I just downloaded. For Windows, you have one additional step, so you can click on Action and click on Get Windows Password, and then it asks you for the encryption key that you created, right? And so on the back end, AWS encrypts the keys with your key, and then you have to use it to pull it down. So this is the key that I just downloaded in the previous step. I'm going to click decrypt password, and here's the temporary password that's been assigned to this instance. I'm going to copy it. I'm going to go back to my client and connect. So this is just a quirk on my RDP client. So I'm going to click OK and OK. And so now you can see that the remote desktop session is being initiated, right? So now I get the Windows interface and it's loading this machine. So I hope you enjoyed the video. There's a lot more to EC2 than what I just showed you. But if you have any questions, or if you want me to make a video about another part of AWS or EC2, just drop me a comment and I'll do my best. All right, thanks for watching.